Hi, I'm going to discuss over the 3 months what books I read, what movies I watched, and any other educational content that I found out, as well maybe teach you a word or two. Let's start with books. The first book is Winning with Data. It discusses mostly about that maybe your organization is not so data driven. We cannot doubt that everybody uses data these days. We definitely are not on those times where only executives have access to the data and only some middleman person does the requests for that executive to retrieve the data that he needs. Oh, those days were funny to imagine when the decisions were centralized instead of decentralized. And also, nobody will be able to tell whether the data was wrong or not. Maybe the data would have been found to be wrong like 3 months later. Hopefully, your organization is more data driven than that. But how much data driven? The plethora of information that you have, that you stream through, is it rich enough that you have the competitive advantage from other companies? Is it accessible for your other people in your company to make decisions? How decentralized is your company on making decisions? Besides the accessibility, is it easy for them to access the data and perform their operations, or are they just limited and they don't and are they afraid to ask questions to explore more data? Do they even have the knowledge of how to access the data or perform decisions based on the data? This and more can be found in the book Winning with Data. The next book is Uncertainty in Games. Games, in general, give you the confidence to be bold because if you die, you can start all over again. Conclusively, you can take thus risks without being afraid of the persecutions. You can actually handle uncertainty. A common element is when we have to traverse through uncertainty on our real life, we get very repulsive, we get fumble a lot through holding it tight, and it definitely gives a negative emotion, and the only thing that holds us apart is the lasting benefits of accomplishing, overpassing the hurdles to obtain the reward. But in games, we treat the same form of uncertainty from the start as fun. And that is because if we do some failure, we can always think that we can try again. But most importantly is that the games beneath themselves have different forms of uncertainty, and they are a good form to personally grow ourselves. And if we take those uncertainty elements in games in a lot of other stuff that can be applied in our life, it promotes thus a safe environment that we were afraid to do in real life, to accomplish them in a simulated way. So if you read this book and take all the aspects of the types of uncertainty that has its game and then apply it in your real life, I think you can gain a lot of traction of how you handle your uncertainty in life. The next book is Innovation is a State of Mind. That book generally discusses that a lot of the innovation are usually improving existing innovations instead of creating something from scratch. Actually, those are the ones that we should treat them as more valuable than doing something from scratch. Today, the startup world focuses too much on creating something from scratch, and in the past, organizations usually what they try to do is optimize existing processes. And I think in these times we overestimate startups and we underestimate improving existing processes. There is a lot of stuff that from one domain can be passed to another domain to improve an existing process, and we may just be blindfolded by just trying to find some novelty on creating something new. It also discusses different ways to bring innovation into your workplace or in your life. In workplace, maybe be part of the performance review, or in your personal life, you have to think things that you do that could be done in less turnaround time. The next book is Becoming Facebook. It's definitely an interesting book on watching the lenses that Facebook went through for making a great community. From a place where you share photos to your personal loved ones, to having your own personal news feed, to expecting the future, accommodating a virtual place to communicate and explore other groups. There is a lot of things to await from this social giant. They think in many ways how to make impact others did not imagine, such as providing the platform to users in less developed countries that had less internet bandwidth by making the mobile application more lightweight, and also the ones that did not have any internet access to all, they just enabled it for them by creating their own infrastructure to be spread on those locations so they can access their social network. It's also interesting that they care a lot, and that's the thing that they were able to traverse through compared to the rest that had social networks at that time. And also the way they were able to have diversity is, right now we have like a big problem on identifying the cause of how we have each person has a different diversified view, but Facebook does not care how that cause is derived from. They only care about the effect. So that by only focusing on the strengths of each person instead of the weaknesses, they were able to enable a diversified and workplace environment. Still, a lot of challenges ahead with whether people are civilized or not. So I think Facebook has to take some step up, not controlling, but at least an influence. And if influence, it should actually be done scientifically as much as possible instead of sentimental emotions or sensationalism. It should be the same way as how cigarettes now conducted. We know that conclusively found out that they create lung cancer, and then they influence people not to smoke them by putting some awful images on the smoking cigarette and describing the effects of it. The last book I read was Originals, and it's crammed with a lot of concepts of how to be an original. The most important concepts that I found are usually from the first chapters, which are, in order to be original, or actually to have a successful business and to sustain it, is to mitigate risk, which means to have calculated risks. Usually that's why most co-founders, they work together, one that takes huge risks, but other ones tries to mitigate them to the point where they don't become bankrupt. And most of them that started the business, it has been found out that they usually keep their jobs before running something that may not work out in the end. I like the fact also that you have to try to know the domain of the idea, so otherwise, even if it's the correct timing, then and you don't execute it well, you don't adapt to the current situation, it will be like a bumpy road, and you can just trip out and fall from the bicycle if it's bumpy, instead of a smooth ride where you can reach to your destination. So if it's not your correct timing, there is still like space to be innovative by being experimental. There are two types of innovators: ones that only focus on the now, and others that try to learn a lot of broad domain knowledge, being experimental. And those are the ones that are more original, but they usually at a later age bring out their inventions. So if your idea is not in the correct timing, you can, if it's going to be too far away of the future, maybe you can just write a science fiction book and express it in a metaphorical way so people can digest that idea, like Shakespeare did. Or if it's very near and you are successful, like you know that you're very very close on promoting that idea, then maybe just doing podcasts or other forms similar to podcasts to promote your message, so more people can lean into your idea. So now let's talk about the movies that I watched in the past 3 months. Two movies I watched. The first one is Brain on Fire, and on Brain on Fire we learned that we live in a workplace that are too much specialized. I mean, they build stuff only based on their skills rather than being originals. We can see that when a patient, the protagonist of that movie, they tried to identify and diagnose what was wrong with her, and they tried all the stuff that they already existing knew, and because they did not fit on their current work frame, they just put her to the ward. So it was not only after like some brave stuff went to a professor and wanted some creative answer on explanation of that issue, and he found out that this issue was not diagnosed correctly because the work frame does not have all the answers. It was an anomaly that it was not detected on their current work frame, and the surprising fact is that 10% were diagnosed of this anomaly, and it was not spread around for other professionals to know, so they can put that into the work frame. So the protagonist wrote a book about it, so more people are more aware about. So this is like describes the main problem that we have today, where researchers don't think too much out of the box, and we have to find a way to make researchers do more that instead of finding out whether it fits on the current framework. The second movie that I watched was Face Off, where two identities were swapped, and it just describes John Locke on personal identity philosophical concept to how much how do we identify a person based on their memories or on their physical bodies. Most people identify a person by their physical body, and it only gets overridden of who they are when they describe a specific memory only that individual knows. And John Locke described that the person represents of he represents of what he represents as much as how much back he can remember of his past memories. And he also ascertains and he admits that only the person, if there was a body swap, only the person himself will know that he is not what he is now, what he is before, but the rest will know him as how his body physically represents. But my question when watching that movie is, although that is an old movie, is whether a person is more than just his memories, whether his short-term memories gain more bigger weight than his past memories. What about his current mindset and what is his future plans? What a character actually represents. So that reminds me how the legal system, because John Locke was the one that influenced the legal system of how to prosecute someone is guilty or not. It kind of facilitated a lot, but now we have to change courses and say we should not treat people as a dead end based on their past memories. We should also take account the current character. So that is, and also when they go to jails, we should not treat them as a dead end. We should also make them as an opportunity to gain personal growth, so they can go back to society. So that those are our questions that I wrote in also one of my blog posts. Let's go to some interesting educational content. I read some partially the autobiography of Elon Musk, and I wrote a tribute page for him and the important events that he has done. And most likely the favorite quote of Elon Musk is, you can have all the eggs in one basket if you know how to control it. And I think the main message that you can learn from Elon Musk is the problem of having an idea is how you can be able to control it. Elon Musk failed a lot of times on having control of his idea. One from his own on his first startup, also on PayPal he had the same problems. Even on PayPal, he was like, he invested a lot of money that didn't work out to take control of the company. So on the third time, three hits and you're out. I think on the third when he had like 2 strikes, on the third pitch he did a home run with SpaceX and then Tesla and Solaris, the rest of the companies that he startups. Another educational content is Flash video game, and now Flash will become deprecated. So speaking of that, Socrates Jones, and this is a very nice Phoenix Wright style game where you have to object to other philosophers about the virtue of morality. And one of my classes, or one of the philosophical classes I did was morality. All business all business majors need to do that, because most people don't care about morals. And I really liked it, and the ending was suspenseful, so I think you will learn a lot of the stuff that I learned in class if you play that game. So now that we're done and we wrapped up, let me give you a word or two. Okay, so the first word is alternative facts. I used to call this more like blind faith. It's almost the same thing. And what that means is when somebody talks to you in a sensational way, or overwhelming you with emotions, it actually freezes your logic circuit on ascertain whether that information is valid or not. And you just, instead of, it's more like bypassing it. It's like a firewall bypassing that information and accepting it as a valid source of truth. And that it is. It's what's all about it is it's about the process. And you can, it is where you, I think, and the second word is echo chambers. But to me that is more like normal science, and we've seen that also right now before on the movie that we just discussed, Brain on Fire, where what people believe is everything is already settled and they don't have to reconfigure the framework to include other stuff that they have not considered before. And instead of trying to consider a new fact that can fit in the framework, they throw it in the word. And all of those can be learned more by reading Thomas Kuhn's Scientific Revolutions and how paradigm shifts come. In layman terms, is like we all have like some pair of set of lens of glasses that we see, and some of the stuff that are hidden, we don't see them because those lens of glasses that we wear obfuscate those things. So generations by generations, we change our glasses to a new type of lens of glasses, and we seem to appear to believe that what happened in the past did not exist, and we believe that all people were the same sense, wore the same lens of glasses as our previous ancestors did. But if you really want to dig deep down the rabbit hole, we evolve, our software evolves, and it's part of us becoming more civilized humans. Thanks for reading, I mean watching this summary of the books, movies, educational contents, and the two words I wanted to give you, you can learn